Hello there, bookworms. How you feeling today? Feeling good? No? You're having a bad day? I'm sorry. Here's a tiny Pokemon battle that I hope will make you feel better. Pikachu, use Thundershock. Bzz. It's not very effective, but it's adorable! So I'm apparently not very good at getting these videos out on time. I know I said that I'd try to have one out each Friday, but this past Friday, my family had to make a short road trip up to Chicagoland for a cousin's wedding, and since I have a desktop, it just didn't happen. I'm thinking Wednesdays might work better. I don't know, we'll roll with the punches. So last time I asked you to vote on a genre for our collaborative novella, and I'm quite impressed by the voter turnout. Thank you, you guys are lovely. I was actually really surprised by your choices. I thought that science fiction would just blow everything out of the park, but for the longest time, mystery was winning. Did not expect that. Also, many of you chose other, and some of those choices fit in well with the other genres. Like, someone voted for psychological thriller, and that's sort of a subgenre of horror, or it can be. So I sort of set that in there. I don't know if that was the best place to put it, but I figured that would be a good spot for it. Also, many of you double voted, which you weren't supposed to do. But it's okay, I suppose. You were probably just a little excited, right? You were excited? If you double voted, I split your vote. So if you voted for a sci-fi romance, I gave science fiction a half point and romance a half point. In the end, though, it was fantasy that won with a whopping 30% of the votes. I'm personally very happy about this because I am a fantasy nerd through and through. It's also very easy to cross other genres with fantasy, so if we want to put a little bit of romance in there or a little bit of mystery, we can easily do that. Now we have one more step before we can start getting into details. Fantasy is a vast genre, and we can move in so many different directions with it, it's not even funny. So in order to make this process even easier, we're going to narrow things down a bit with this week's poll survey thingamajigger. There are two main categories of fantasy. There's high fantasy and low fantasy. High fantasies are set in invented or parallel worlds. That could refer to a completely different world, such as that of the Wheel of Time series, two worlds connected by portals, such as the Chronicles of Narnia, or a world within a world, such as the magical settings of Harry Potter. They also typically contain plenty of magic, monsters, and creatures. The best example of a high fantasy would be the Lord of the Rings. Low fantasies, on the other hand, tend to focus less on magic and monsters and more on reality. They are usually set within the real world rather than a fictional one. I think it's important that we choose between these two forms of fantasy before we delve any deeper. Secondly, there are several subgenres of fantasy that we should consider. The sword and sorcery subgenre usually contains swashbuckling heroes, action, romance, and magic. They also generally focus on personal battles rather than world-endangering matters. There's dark fantasy, which focuses on horror elements and/or the supernatural. Then you have myth-based fantasies, which are fantasies based on mythology. Bet you couldn't figure that one out, could ya? And finally, there's a superhero fantasy, which I hope is self-explanatory. But if none of these subgenres float your boat, you can vote to keep this novella simply a high fantasy or a low fantasy, since they are still technically subgenres. I hope that makes sense. So for this week, if you're still interested in this crazy little project, please go to this survey poll thingy and cast your votes. That's dft.ba/-fantasies. Voting will stop on the 4th of July, which is Monday. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Also, any general comments or suggestions are always welcome. I read all of them and I definitely take them all to heart. Alrighty kids, I'm gonna skedoodle out of here. I'll catch you sometime next week.